morning, Ms. Norman. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Mr. Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson. This morning, we will be presenting the evidence of Mr. Andre Pillay, who is the General Manager, Treasury ESCOM. His statement, the main statement is contained in the big bundle, and both bundles are marked Volume U, which is which is preserved for all the ESCOM witnesses. And Mr. Chairperson, you will have file 6 and file 7 in front of you. In file 6, that is where the main statement is contained, and then in file 7, the supplementary statement is contained in that file.
So this is Exhibit U. Then you have file 6.
And file 7.
Is this the first U?
No, Mr. President. All the witnesses from ESCOM have been using that U number.
Don't we have U1, U2 earlier?
We do. This one
would be consistent and mark.
We have U6. If the chairperson opens.
I see it's file 6, but I don't know whether that would be the same as U6.
It is U6.
Okay, then I
if
think
you open the first page.
Let's mark it
U6.
U6.
That's
Exhibit
correct.
U6, and then that is now. And then this one would be Exhibit U7.
It will be still U6, but in file 7, because U6 is preserved for this witness. We're allocating them according to the witness. Yes.
So this one should be what?
U6 in file 7.
U6
in file 7. But if it might create confusion, you can mark that U6A in brackets.
Yeah, that's much better. Then it's.
Yes.
So, can I
mark it 6A?
Exhibit U8. Must we retain the file 7 off, or must
we retain that file 7?
That,
that's correct, yes.
But we'll refer to it as Exhibit U8.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Might I just ask Ms. Rabishele to just quickly go and mark the witnesses before we commence? Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, this witness is going to testify about the Huarong transaction. The chairperson has been appraised of this transaction by my learned friend, Mr. Maleka, when he first addressed the chairperson as to what the evidence relating to ESCOM would entail.
Yes.
Briefly, the Huarong transaction is where a certain company called Tribus approached ESCOM unsolicited with an unsolicited proposal and said to ESCOM, I will fund all your capital projects. And then it placed certain conditions to that. And then we'll see how that then proposal evolved and became a proposal from Huarong Energy Africa, which is the Huarong, normally referred to as the Huarong transaction.
Let me just make sure I've got everything that I should have here. In Exhibit U6, I expected to find the witness statement at the top, but I'm finding annexure AP1, and that might be because it hasn't been put back, because I did take it out, but this morning I believe I asked the protectors to make sure it's put in. Do you know where it is? Is it supposed to be on U8?
No. There is no U8.
We've just done Exhibit U8 with you.
No, Chairperson, we didn't do 8. You said U6A, in brackets A.
Oh.
I beg your pardon if I wasn't
There must be some letters you swallowed.
I could have. Thank you.
So this small one that is marked file 7, you say it should be UA.
A in brackets, yes. Small a, 6A in brackets.
Okay. And this other one?
That is U6, the main one.
Yeah, you see. The one is an alphabet, another is a
Yes.
number.
No.
That is what may have, when you
Because-
said
because-
A, I thought you were saying 8.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
But
Those are the two that
those
we are going
markings are
to
fine.
refer to. That's correct, yes.
But the statement is supposed to be on,
The
on the big
main
file.
statement is supposed to be on the main file because it goes with all those annexures in the big statement. Have you managed to locate it, Mr.? I could
think
hand
I've
up-
seen this, no, it's fine, I think I've seen the supplementary, they may have put them together.
Yes.
Yes, they put the supplementary together with the main statement.
Yes.
The supplementary should go with the main statement?
No,
Come
no, Mr.
behind
Chairman. It
should
goes
be on
into the small file.
Okay.
It goes into U6A.
Okay, no, that's fine. And then the main one is supposed to be
To go in there,
just under the
Under the-
AP1 file divider or not?
just under the file divider.
Just under the,
The yellow file-
before AP1?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. This file seems to be too full.
We'll attend to it during the
Maybe
tea
it
break.
might be fine, we might manage.
Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
think we'll manage, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. I was just mentioning to the chairperson that then this Warong proposal was placed before ESCOM, and we will demonstrate how it was pursued throughout, although it was very clear that the terms in the Warong proposal were very onerous on ESCOM, and it was made quite clear to ESCOM that even this Warong Energy Africa was not going to be able to deliver on what it was promising. But nevertheless, it found its way and it got signed, and will show how those terms are onerous, bypassing the processes that were supposed to have been followed, and will demonstrate how all the rules and procedures were flouted.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, this evidence will fall, or will address terms of reference 1.4 and 1.9. The notice. Yes.
I just think I must mention this,
Yes.
and the whole legal team can remember as they deal with various procurement issues
Matters, yes.
and the witnesses, that where there has been non-compliance,
Yes.
non-compliance can be a bona fide error
Yes.
or can be deliberate. It will be deliberate where the objective or the motive is corruption. So it's important that as you lead witnesses, you apply your mind to which one you are seeking to make out.
Yes.
Yeah.
That will do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Because there may be difficulty if during the evidence an issue is treated simply as a non-compliance without going a step further to say
That's
it
correct,
wasn't
yes.
just non-compliance.
Yes.
The motive was corruption.
Yes.
To later on ask that a finding be made that it's corruption.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The notices.
Of course,
sorry.
that becomes much more important when we're looking at an implicated person responding.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, Chairperson. The notices were served on the implicated persons, but their 14 days has not lapsed. We have had a reaction from the representatives of Mr. Sean Maritz. I believe that Mr. Van der Westhuizen, or from his law firm, someone is here. But they were requesting in their letter, which was brought to our attention yesterday, seeking all the annexures to the affidavit of Mr. Play. And we've made arrangements because they could not be emailed to them because of it's quite a bulky document. But a copy, we've been promised by Mr. DBA that it will be made available within the next hour to them of all those annexures.
No,
Thank
that's
you.
fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the chairperson is satisfied, then may I...
I guess you meant Mr. Pedler. You said Mr. Devier, I thought.
De
Or
Beer.
Devier,
De
or
Beer,
somebody
yes,
else.
De Beer, that's the one who attends to bundles.
Okay.
De Beer, thank you. Then, Mr. Chairman, may then the witness be sworn in.
Yes, thank you.
Please state your full names for the record.
Andre Frank Pudding?
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pillay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pillay, you've got two files in front of you. You must have listened when we were addressing the chairperson about what's contained in the files. Your main statement is contained in the big file, which is Exhibit U6. You will see, could you just go to that file? Do you recognize that statement?
Yes. Yes, yes, Chair.
Thank you. If you go to the last page, page 15 of that statement. Is that your signature that appears on there?
Yes, Chair.
And was that commissioned on the 18th of February 2019?
Yes, Chair.
And are the contents of that statement true and correct?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. And then if you go to the small file, which is U6A, next to you, the next file, thank you. There is another statement contained in there, and it's marked supplementary affidavit. Do you see that?
Yes, Chair.
Do you recognize it?
Yes, Chair.
Is it your supplementary affidavit?
Yes, Chair.
If you go to page 11 of that, it will be page 5 to 8 on the right-hand corner. Is that your signature appearing there?
Yes, Chair.
And are the contents of that affidavit true and correct?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. We are going to start with your evidence in the main statement. Could you, for the record, tell the chairperson in what capacity are you employed? Are you first employed by ESCOM? Am I correct?
Yes, I was initially employed in the capacity as Senior Manager of Funding and currently in the role of as a General Manager, so responsible for the Treasury of ESCOM.
Yes. How many years have you been with ESCOM now?
7 years.
Yes. Now, before we deal with that, can you just tell us about your qualifications?
Chair, I have a BSc in mathematics, and I've also done a couple of other courses, but that's in the main my qualification, a BSc in mathematics.
Yes. Now where you are now, you're General Manager, Treasury ESCOM. What are your responsibilities?
Chair, I'm overall responsible for the Treasury, for the running and the operational functions of the Treasury, but primarily responsible for the financing and the funding of ESCOM, the risk management, and also, excuse me, the risk management and also the operations being the back office responsibility of the Treasury Chair.
And then as a General Manager, Treasury ESCOM, who do you report to?
I report to the CFO.
And then who reports to you from the managers that serve within that Treasury Department?
There are 5 colleagues that report into me.
Yes.
At the moment. Singadila Shweni, Mandla Malika, Vincent Makuva, Francois Fenter, and Gertrude Malokwane.
Yes. Now, as you know, you are here to tell us about the Hwarong transaction, am I right?
Yes, Chair.
Yes. Could you please tell the chairperson when for the first time were you approached by Tribus about this transaction?
Chair, in 2015, they approached me, or my office, when I was still the senior general manager, or the senior manager in funding execution, and they were referred to me by one of my colleagues to approach and to contact me with a potential financing solution.
Who is they?
Tribus, Chair.
Okay.
And in specific, Rajiv Thomas, Chair.
Yes. Could you just explain to the chairperson what is it that was proposed by Tribus in full? What is it that they wanted to do? What is it that they were offering to ESCOM?
So, Chair, the Tribus team are engineers by training, or largely engineers by training. They are engineers, management consultants, so they have the technical capacity. So in the initial response, they teamed up with a group called Mazi Capital, and the combination would provide the technical solutions for the CapEx of ESCOM and also the financing solution.
Yes. And then you say in paragraph 2 of your statement that then later on, instead of Tribus continuing, then you were approached by Huarong Energy Africa.
Yes, Chair. So, Chair, from the initial meeting, there was a couple of engagements with them, and their relationship and partnership transitioned. They ended up coming to us with a consortium of Tribus and Huarong Energy Africa.
Yes.
Huarong Energy, sorry.
Yes. In simple terms, what was Huarong offering you?
Huarong was offering, again, similar to the Mazi Capital proposal. They were dealing with the financing. They are a Chinese company, a Chinese company with both domiciled and locationed in China and in Hong Kong, and they largely, the parent company is responsible for asset management overseas, and they then have a number of subsidiaries.
Yes. And then in paragraph 3, you allude to what Tribus, the meeting between Tribals and the Minister of Public Enterprise at the time. Mm-hmm. Could you just tell the chairperson about that?
Chair, in one of the discussions that we've had with the Tribus team, they did not indicate who at the time, but they said that as part of their team, they have someone that knows the Minister of Public Enterprises. He's got good political connections.
And who was that minister?
Minister Lynn Brown at the time, the Minister of DPE.
Yes. And then tell us then, after that, now you're made aware that they say they had met the minister. Did you inquire as to what happened at the meeting with the minister?
Chair, at the time, one of the senior managers or senior general managers in ESCOM, who was working in the office of the CEO, Mr. Brian Molefe at the time, approached me to indicate that there is a meeting. They got correspondence from the minister's office or contacted by the minister's office to indicate that there's a meeting, and the meeting would take place in Cape Town. Mr. Molefe was also invited to the meeting, but he could not make it. He was represented at that meeting by Mr. Freddie Ndau, who left ESCOM last year. But so that is the meeting. I just had verbal feedback from him at the time following the meeting that it was basically an introductory meeting with the minister, and the feedback was that the minister said you must go and contact ESCOM and follow ESCOM processes.
And you can't recall when exactly within your timeline that happened?
So if I, just on reflection on the timeline, is that if I look at the timeline, so they met us in 2015, and it was around May that they met us. Mr. Molefe left ESCOM around end of 2016. So it was probably around middle of 2015 that this happened.
Yes. And then in the same paragraph, you deal with a meeting that you attended with the minister.
Yeah.
Yes.
Chair, in that meeting, there were some issues that and at that stage, and just for background, Chair, is that we secure funding from the World Bank, and there was an issue with one of the projects that that ESCOM is rolling out with regards to the World Bank. My relevance in that meeting is the World Bank, given its responsibility, the Treasury is the touch point. I joined that meeting, I accompanied the Treasurer at the time to that meeting. And to elaborate, Chair, is that in the meeting, when the minister started the meeting, she, in passing, mentioned that, she met with the Tribus team, and she informed them that they must follow ESCOM processes. That was during that meeting, Chair.
Yes. And then in paragraph 4, you deal with how you looked at that proposal, the very first sentence. You looked at the proposal by Huarong. How did you view it? Was it going to be beneficial to ESCOM? And if so, why did you feel that it was going to be beneficial to ESCOM?
Chair, what we deal with in paragraph 4, it is the comment that I make there is that in the initial discussions with both the Tribus team or the Warong Energy Africa, there was nothing at the initial experiences that raised alarm bells. It seemed as if it is a legitimate proposal. They seemed like business people. They had previous dealings with Eskom in a different capacity. So at the initial impression, I was not concerned about them. And Chair, I think given the course of the nature of our work, we manage and we meet a variety of people, and some you obviously meet and you realize this is something contentious, and so that was not my impression at the time.
Yes. I know this is out of sequence, but you deal with the change of your attitude towards the approach in the same paragraph.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you could just deal with it so that you don't have to come back to it.
Yeah, Chair, and I think also the reason for raising it here from my perspective was during the course of the discussion, so the discussion started in 2015, the first encounter. Then we had an engagement with them formally through an RFP process. And then things were still following the processes that we were used to, up until a period where we realized that, and also towards the end, there were certain discussions that were happening with the chairman at the time. He was, at that specific point, he was not the chairman, Mr. Zitembe Koza. He only became chairman later in that year. And then towards the end of the process that followed, Chair, they had direct contact with Mr. Sean Maritz. In the meetings that we had with them, indicated that this is a problem for me. I also indicated to them that I will suspend all activity with them if they continue on this path. And I will elaborate on that at a later stage.
Yes. And let's move on. And then in paragraph 5, you repeat what you have said in paragraph 1 about the approach by Warong. Mm-hmm. But then you mentioned certain persons in that paragraph. Could you just have a look at that paragraph and tell the chairperson the significance of you mentioning those persons in that paragraph? Yeah.
So, Chair, we received a formal unsolicited proposal from them in June of 2016. And this was, and as normal, Chair, when we do engage with external parties, we try and impress upon them, or we impress upon them that there's a formal process that Eskom has to follow from that procurement perspective. We also indicated to them when they provided the unsolicited proposal. But what was also important here, Chair, is that the particular individuals, Mr. Rajiv Thomas and his colleague Wim ter Blanche, they had dealings with Eskom previously. They met with other people within Eskom. So, and when I say other people, would be in the capital formation, so our CapEx, where we do our capital development programs, those are the people, and I specifically mentioned Mr. Pubi Govender here, and a variety of things, and a number of people that they've met and spoken to. I think even prior to meeting us, that was the impression that I got.
Yes. And then Eskom decided to issue an RFI. Could you just tell the chairperson about that process, what it entails?
Yes. So, Chair, and this was also given my period at Eskom, a new process, not a new process, but a part of the commercial process. Normally we would issue RFPs. This was an unsolicited proposal, and we wanted to make sure that there's no other better proposals because I think their impression also was, Chair, that this was an unsolicited bespoke proposal and we could just follow the unbespoke route. We then wanted to make sure that there is no similar proposals or better proposals out there. And we issued an RFP to the market, Chair.
Before you get to that, what are the options that Eskom has if you are approached by someone unsolicited, and can you source from people without taking or following the procurement procedures, or when you are approached as in the manner in which Warong did, then what is the best option to follow in those circumstances?
The best option to follow would be the RFP process that we've initiated here.
Yes.
And the other forms of funding that we do raise are normally market-based, so it's quite transparent. It's in the capital markets. And this was when it's unique or different proposals, we would then put it through an RFP process, Chair.
And you have, in paragraph 6, just highlighted what are the requirements that you wanted anyone who was responding to your RFI to meet. Could you just highlight those for the chairperson, please?
So, Chair, we highlighted that it should be innovative funding. At this stage, Chair, Eskom relied a lot on government guarantees to be able to secure its funding. And so we were looking at funding that would not utilize government guarantees. And then the funding should be greater than 15 billion. The financing does not contravene any of our loan covenants that we have. Chair, there currently we have a debt book of around 420 billion, and we certainly want to make sure that we align to the covenant so that you don't trigger any untoward or events of default in relation to the existing book or debt. Eskom solution does not require equity, so because we are a state-owned entity and we can't do equity or specific or equity injection. Financing option is in line with Eskom's current cost or better. The financing solution involved a reputed organization with funding track records. And then the funding term is attractive to Eskom. Funding solution can be implemented within a reasonable short period.
Now, then in paragraph 7, you deal with the funding plan. Would you just tell the chairperson what is the funding plan and who's responsible, which department within Eskom is responsible for creation of that plan?
So, Chair, the funding plan is the responsibility of the Eskom Treasury. We developed the plan, and the plan forms part of Eskom's overall corporate plan. And the plan is basically, Chair, the program or the strategy that Eskom will embark upon over a 5-year period. We then, in line with that, develop a funding plan, given the organizational financing requirements, the capital requirements, and also the business requirements. We develop a funding plan, and this is the detail of such a funding plan that we have, Chair.
Yes. Could you just take us through that, because it becomes relevant when we compare what was being offered and the financial situation and position in which Eskom was at the time?
Yeah. So, Chair, basically, and this is largely what we've seen over the number of years, the combination of funding sources. So in the table, Chair, there's the domestic bonds, and that is largely the bonds that are listed in our JSE, government bonds, and there are similar other entities that also list these bonds. And Eskom has quite an extensive program in raising funding in the local bond markets. Then we, from time to time, Chair, would issue bonds or loans in the international capital markets, where we would go and source funding and issue and list bonds in the international markets. What we also have, Chair, is our commercial paper program, and that is our short-term funding, so money market, what is conventionally known as money market. Those would be our commercial paper loans. We also approach and are engaging with development finance institutions like the World Bank, African Development Bank, some of the multilateral institutions, and they also provide funding. Chair, they have mandates, obviously, in Africa, in the energy sector, in the electricity sector, so they have dedicated funding for that. And then we have export credit agencies. This is basically funding that governments provide to their export-orientated companies, so that if a company exports to South Africa or is executing a project within South Africa in Eskom, their government would provide a guarantee so that we can source the funding for that. And then lastly, Chair, is what we term structured products, and that is a label that we give to what we would go out from time to time to secure funding from what is available in the market, such as innovative funding sources.
Yes. And then you give a total of all of that in the end. What was that amount?
It was 43 billion.
Yes. Thank you. And then now...
This was for a period of 5 years?
Of 5 years, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Thank you. And then you deal with the responses then to the RFP program that you embarked upon. And you mentioned who responded to that. How many people were there? Could you just summarize that, please?
Chair, in the RFI that we received, we received about 12 responses, and they are listed there under paragraph 8, Chair. So there was a variety of responses that we got from ABSA, Deloitte's Capital, Warong, Huawei, JP Morgan, Nedbank, Peru Capital Partners, and Total Utilities Management Services, Regiments, Rand Merchant Bank, Standard Chartered, Superstars Group, AfriSet Investments Limited.
Yes. Just something that I didn't clarify. Am I correct that Warong was a company established purely for the purposes of offering the proposal to Eskom? Am I correct?
That was they proposed that this is a structure that they set up, and it would provide the service for Eskom.
Yes. So it was a special vehicle set up for that proposal?
It was a structure that they put in place, and if I look at from the 2015 to date, it was something that they were working on. So it was to address a specific requirement of Eskom.
Yes, thank you. And then can you just move then on to paragraph 9, where you now start dealing with some of the annexures attached to your statement.
Yes. So, Chair, this is the RFP process, the RFI process,
yes.
And then towards the end of December, Chair, so part of the RFI response that we got, there was a term sheet, and the term sheet basically is just a high level or a framework with what would go into the main agreement that we would sign eventually. And during December, Mr. Arnold Singh contacted me. So before I go there, Chair, I have the outcome of the RFP process in my normal engagements with him and reporting to him, shared with him these responses. At this stage, I was not aware if he knew any of these in particular were wrong at this stage. It was unknown to me.
So you were reporting to Mr. Arnold
Singh,
Singh
he was the CFO at the time.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Could we turn to the term sheet that appears at page 31? It's annexure AP2. Could you just read what's there and the amount that was being offered? And then we'll go through some of the terms that are critical and that are relevant to the entire statement that you've put up.
Yeah. So 19 December 2016, strictly private and confidential term sheet, asset financing for the purposes of providing a solution for the various capital projects at Eskom Holdings Limited. Summary terms and conditions, approximately US $1.5 billion. And that was the heading of the term sheet?
Yes. And just what does it say? Was this a binding term sheet at the time? And what's contained in that maybe the first three lines?
The first 3 lines, it was for discussion purposes, and it was a non-binding term sheet.
Yes. And then I would like you to turn over to some of the terms that are critical, which you are going to have to refer to later on. If you go to page 34, there is a facility fee there. Could you just read out what was proposed as a facility fee?
Facility fee of 1.6% of the amount of the program value is payable by Eskom on signature of the Alpha, and the Alpha refers to an asset lease finance agreement. This is for the development costs and arrangement costs and the cost of setup for the EPC panels. And EPC panels, Chair, is the engineering, procurement, and construction panels and the working of the solution.
And that 1.6% would be the 1.6 of the 1.5 billion US dollars?
Yes.
And how much is that in rands?
In rands, it is roughly, I think, $24 million.
Yes, and then the next one is annual fee, annual commitment fee. How much was that?
And that was 8.8%.
That would also be 8% of the billions.
0.8% of 1.5
billion, yes. And then can you calculate how much that was?
That is roughly, I think, off the top of my head, probably, I think, 25 million.
And you have a cancellation fee. Could you read that paragraph, please?
A cancellation fee of 0.2% of the amount of the program value shall be payable by Eskom if Eskom repudiates, terminates, or cancels the term sheets once the binding term sheet and the mandate letter are signed by both parties or accepted by both parties.
And your 0.2% would be how much?
The 0.2% in this case would, of the 1.5 billion would be roughly, I think $15 million, sorry.
50.
So it's 20, yeah, no, sorry, 30 million, sorry.
30 million.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then we have, those are the clauses. And then, so this term sheet is what was being proposed. But before we finish with that, could you turn to page 37, please, Mr. Play?
Yes, sure.
Could you read 2.18, please?
Escrow account, if the lender so desires and without fee, subject to the compliance with applicable regulations including, but not limited to arbitrage regulations, the proceeds of the loan will be deposited in an escrow account acceptable to the lender.
Okay. Could you just explain that? Was Eskom going to have control over that account?
The proposal here was that Eskom would, they would control the account and the management of that account.
Yes. And then, sorry. Before we get to the signing of this term sheet, could you just then tell the chairperson what happened? Now, you are at a point where you have it, and you want to deal with it as to what were the processes that were followed at that point.
Yeah, Chair, so in December 2016, Mr. Anoj Singh indicated that he had a call from Rajiv Thomas, and the discussion was that to sign the non-binding term sheet, and that would give him indications or comfort that he can give to his partners that that there's a good working relationship and we can proceed with it. There's common understanding, if I can call it that, around some of the proposals, and we can. But it was also important here, chairs. It was obviously sent to us, to me, to look at it. I was very uncomfortable with the fact that we are signing term sheets. It is not common for us to sign term sheets in this way. I raised it with Mr. Singh, and he said, it's just a non-binding term sheet. What we did do, Chair, was to look at it to make sure that the non-binding nature of it is contained.
And then
they proceeded, oh, sorry.
Yes, oh, sorry, were you proceeding? Sorry.
They proceeded to sign, both Mr. Anoj and Rajiv Thomas signed. At this stage also, Chair, what was also important is that in part of the legal process that we follow, that we need to get confirmation that the person that signs is duly authorized to sign. So it was a non-binding term sheet, and I think in that regard, there was no formal indication of that.
Yes, and then you talk about a trip then to China. Who attended? Who went to China, and what was the reason? Yeah.
So, Chair,
maybe before that, you said you sought to satisfy yourselves that there was something that said it was not binding.
Yes, Chair.
Where do I find that in the document?
The first part that you read. If I may.
If you've got it, Ms. Norman, you can just.
Yes, thank you. If I may just direct the witness, it would be at page 52. Page 52, Chairperson, there's a non-binding clause in there. Okay.
Page 52 is the non-binding clause, yes, Chair.
Yes. Could you read it to the Chairperson, please?
Non-binding term sheet is indicative only and not exhaustive, and may require that further additions and amendments, as advised by its respective legal texts and advisors, will not be legally binding on any party and will not give rise to enforceable rights and obligations except the terms set out in paragraph 17 and 18, which will be legally binding as set out in the last party signing the term sheet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now, at this point, just in reference to what the chairperson has asked you, was the internal legal department of ESCOM involved?
No, we only relied on White and Case to advise us on this. And obviously, for my own purposes, also looked at it to ensure that the non-binding nature of it is contained.
Is it normal that you would sign things like these, even if you say, I know that in your evidence you said it was not usual for ESCOM to sign term sheets, but this has got legal terms in it. Is it normal that you wouldn't go to your internal legal section and say, look at this, is this appropriate, can you sign it?
Yeah, so in our case, to Ms. Chair, the question is that we don't normally sign term sheets. It was not ESCOM process to do that. And it was certainly unprecedented to sign term sheets. And we did not go to our legal. We relied on what White and Case, the external legal advice, gave us in reviewing this.
We are going to deal extensively with that advice because unless there was another advice, the one that you're talking about is where they advised ESCOM not to sign.
Yes.
And then I'm just trying to understand how then you relied on it.
So Chair, the reliance on that was when we received this, and even in the signing of this term sheet, I updated, as indicated earlier, Mr. Singh about the developments, that White and Case had reservations around it, and his view was it's non-binding, so why worry?
We'll deal with that, Mr. Chairperson, later extensively with the White and Case opinion. Thank you. And then after the signing of the term sheet, then there's a trip to China. Could you tell Chairperson about that trip and who went?
So Chair, the signing of the term sheet happened in December. We were scheduled to go to China, Mr. Singh and I. We were in discussions with the China Development Bank to secure a facility. We have secured a facility of about 5 billion through the Chinese government, China Development Bank, and that was part of the negotiations that we embarked on. And that trip was extended to go and meet the Warong team as well as an introductory meeting. Also accompanying us, I was a part of the delegation or the group, was Prish Govender and Pubi Govender.
Yes. And so the unrepilay referred to there in third person, that's yourself, am I correct?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. And what happened then in China? You are there now, you've traveled all the way from South Africa. What was discussed and what was agreed?
So, Chair, in the discussion was obviously, other than my sharing of the agreement and the facility with Mr. Singh, there he had first introduction to the Warong team and the proposal, so he met them personally as part of the meeting. And they discussed the proposal, Chair, and what was certainly shocking or surprising to me, Chair, was that he hated the transaction. It did not make sense when they explained it to him. He was almost dismissive of it. But what was in the experience and in the meeting was also quite telling to me was the Chinese delegation on the other side was not fazed by his actions or reactions or the responses that he gave. And only after reflection I realized that this was a concern or a red flag to me. Also in the meeting, what was quite interesting, Chair, is this is the first time I am now exposed to the individual that from the Tribus group that is the political connection. And a gentleman by the name of Rex Madida introduces himself as a political deployee at that meeting.
Now, before you went to China, what was the attitude of ESCOM towards the proposal? I would imagine you wouldn't just travel to China without at least discussing and knowing exactly whether you're interested in it, whether you want to pursue it, or you want to put an end to it. What was the attitude of ESCOM before you traveled?
It was certainly an explorative and initial introduction of Mr. Singh. It was also the first time that, other than the call that I understand from the discussions with Mr. Rajiv, the call in December, it was the first time that he met Mr. Singh. Similarly, my colleague, Mr. Pubi Govender, was also the first time that he met Mr. Singh during that trip. So for me also, Chair, was that is the impression, but that this is the first time that they meet each other. And that is what they told me.
Well, you said that somebody was introduced or introduced himself as a deployee,
Yes.
and you said his name is Rex Madida.
Rex Madida.
But you didn't say everything that you seem to have been told about him when he was introduced. Do you want to include that? If you look at that last sentence of paragraph 10 of your statement.
Sorry, Chair.
If you look at the last sentence of paragraph 10 of your statement, I think you didn't say everything that you are supposed to, that you were told about him or that he told you.
Yeah, so he introduced himself, Chair, as a political deployee of the ANC in KZN, so deployed to Johannesburg.
Okay.
And that is verbatim, almost these words to us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then, were there any agreements concluded in China, either oral or otherwise?
No, so Chair, we had a discussion broadly about the structure, the nature, the entities that are involved. And at the end of the day...
I'm sorry, before you go there. This meeting was happening in China, is that
in
right?
Beijing, China, Chair.
And Mr. Rex Madida, who says he's a political deployee of the ANC in KZN, as far as you know, how does he come to be part of that meeting?
So Chair, he is part of the Tribus group.
Yes.
So he's part of the Tribus group. And they also traveled to China for this meeting.
From South Africa?
From South Africa.
So he had traveled with them, as far as you know, but he had not traveled with the ESCOM delegation?
No. So ours
you found him there?
We found him there.
Yeah.
Ours was an internally approved ESCOM paid trip.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You are still answering the question on whether or not there were agreements reached.
Chair, so there were no agreements reached. We largely discussed the proposal. Towards the end of the day, after the first day, Mr. Singh indicated that he is leaving the three of us there. He's going back to South Africa. He's been called back. We had subsequent meetings, and we were still discussing the transaction. In particular, they were trying to explain to us what is the financing and what's the cost, just the cost of the financing. And we had quite a lengthy discussions around that. And that was basically the discussion. We left them that day, went back to our hotel rooms, and then came back to South Africa.
Yes. Then you deal in paragraph 12 with the proposal and your interactions with Mr. Zetembe Khoza.
So Chair, what I relate...
I'm sorry again, I may have missed something. How did that meeting end in China?
So Chair, it was a very cordial meeting. We greeted and we left. And an important, Chair, is that subsequent to the meeting, I received a letter in January from Mr. Rajiv Thomas to basically confirm what their understanding was of the discussion. I responded to the letter, and I think one of the elements that I did highlight to him in my response letter to him was, firstly, we will have to follow ESCOM processes. The pricing that we discussed is subject to our own internal analysis and approval processes. And I also mentioned to him in that letter that we would have to secure board approval for us to go forward on this proposal or on this discussion.
But the purpose of your trip to China, was it not to meet with the funders? You had raised some money?
Yeah, so Chair, the first day, almost a whole day was dedicated to that meeting.
Yes.
And so the trip was then extended to accommodate a meeting with Hurong.
Oh, and who initiated that meeting with Hurong? Was it ESCOM? Was it Hurong?
No, Hurong approached us. They understood, I think in part of the discussions with us, they learned that we were traveling to China, and then they arranged it. It was not the first time, Chair.
Yes.
We were also in earlier traveling to China. They also wanted to have a meeting, but our program did not allow for that.
Oh, the people you were dealing with from this group, Hurong, they were based in South Africa, but do they have their headquarters in China or what?
So Chair,
Why
South
would they
African-
want to meet you in China when they are based in South Africa? So that's my query.
So Chair, the South Africans are from the Tribus group, and they had a consortium with the Chinese partners, and they are based in China and in Hong Kong.
Or the South African part of the group
Yes,
is
Chair.
based in South Africa, but the Chinese leg of the group is based in China.
Yes, Chair.
Oh, okay. No, now I understand. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just following up on the chairperson's question, you mentioned the letters that were exchanged after the trip. Maybe let me take you there. If you could go to page 404. And that will be annexure AFP 8.
Sorry, Chair.
Did you say 404?
404, Mr. Chairman. Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah.
So that will be towards the end of that bundle.
Yes, it's towards
Mr.
the end, yes. Annexure AP 8. There is an 8 on the, yes. You just tell me, thank you. Could you just read the first line of that letter, and I will just take you basically to what you agreed in principle with them. Okay, could you just read out the first sentence?
Yeah. So the first sentence, thank you for your letter dated 18 January, the letter I referred to, Chair. We thank you for hosting the delegation, the hospitality, generosity, and arrangements made is highly appreciated. And then I deal with some of the principles of the transaction. And if I may, ESCOM considered the range of benefits that this proposal presents, and it is and for these reasons, we have resolved to pursue this proposal. We in principle agree with the benefits we have listed in the above mentioned letter, and we comment as follows. And then the large commitment volume of 1.5 to 6 billion provides a significant funding solution for ESCOM and diversification of its funding sources, unguaranteed funding. This was certainly the objective of the request for information issued on the 7th of October, to which you responded. Therefore, it is a benefit that would largely discount in our analysis. The improved financial management of these projects by ESCOM, but maintaining control of the asset. Created asset is held in an SPV for the duration of the lease period, thereafter transferred to ESCOM. The legal, accounting, and governance implications will have to be resolved. So that we did not resolve. Cash flow, minimal cash outflow prior to completion. This is a considerable advantage of the proposal. Balance sheet, these benefits will have to be tested by the accounting treatment of the asset to be created. The long-term tenor, basically the duration of the facility, most likely for 10 years, as opposed to 3 to 5 years of a banking facility. These are certainly fair comparison, but should rather be contrasted with the existing long-term unguaranteed debt, as ESCOM does not rely on 5 to 3 year bank facilities for funding purposes. Project-based fund allocation provided most efficient use of funds. The use will also addressed in comment 3.
Yes, and then in a way forward, because that's important.
The way forward also, Chair, and if I may just touch on the pricing comment that I've made earlier, is that I highlighted their view was we've agreed on the pricing, and my response was ESCOM will, based on its own analysis, evaluate the pricing and engage HEA. And then the way forward, as you are aware, ESCOM has signed the indicative term sheet with HEA on the 21st of December that will be presented to the board meeting scheduled for the 3rd to 4th February for consideration and approval for further negotiation and conclusion of the facility agreement. Therefore, based on the outcome of the board meeting, we will be granted the resolution and mandate to engage HEA formally.
Yes. And that letter was a response to the letter that appears at page 400, am I right?
Yeah.
Marked AP7, which you received from Huarong Energy Africa.
Yes.
And in that letter, if I may just, the benefits that they were offering to you, they highlight them. Could you just read those out?
The benefits that they highlight is, and it's in line with my letter that I responded to, a large commitment of 1.5 billion a non-South Africa government guarantee required, better financial management for Eskom without giving up control of the asset created. Asset is held in an SPV for the duration of the lease period, thereafter transferred to Eskom. Cash flow minimum cash outflow prior to completion. Balance sheet, no liability prior to completion. Long-term tenor, most 10 years, as opposed to 5 years of a bank facility. Project-based fund allocation provide most efficient use of funds, essentially to get funding without immediately impacting Eskom's financials, and new balance sheet potentially were wrong. China will need to be brought in.
Yes. If you turn to page 402, they seem to make a final proposal and they tabulate what is it that would remain unchanged from their first proposal. Page 402. Same letter that you're reading from. The next page.
Sorry, it's AP7.
Yes, it's 87.
Sorry, the question?
The question is, if you turn over the page, they seem to make final proposals to you. If you read the paragraph during our discussion.
During our discussion in Beijing, we highlighted the above to you and further made a final proposal with respect to this offering. This is, HEA will offer a final rate of LIBOR plus 720 basis points, which is a discount of 3 basis points if and only if the following conditions are met. All fees and charges are described in the term sheet. Submissions remain unchanged. We require a formal response from Eskom to our proposal. Once again, our offering is a substantial volume and value to Eskom's capital program. We truly hope your team will consider all aspects of the structure as specified above and make decision as soon as possible.
And then the LIBOR, could you just explain briefly what it means in simple language?
Chair, the LIBOR is the London Interbank overnight rate. That is basically in London the rate at which banks lend money to one another. And that is the rate. Currently, it's at about 3%, and it's so when you look at it, it would be just at a indicative level 3% plus 7.2%.
Yes. Then, thank you, Chair. Then you take us then to what then happened when all of these things came or presented before the BTC and the IFC, which are the committees of the board, the board tender committee and the IFC. Could you just take the chairperson through those?
So, Chair, the submission to the board and my comments in the letter referring to the February date, that was in discussions with Mr. Singh that's the meeting that will happen. I don't normally attend that meeting. So the wrong submission amongst 2 other submissions was proposed, and the instruction or request from him to submit it, he said that he wanted to demonstrate to the board what are the issues that we're dealing with to resolve some of Eskom's financing requirements.
Yes.
And also part of it, Chair, is if you look at the proposal, it's not just a financing proposal that they lend money directly to Eskom. It is also linked to a capital program that this specific money would be used for the expansion of that capital. And that required, as stated in that paragraph 12, Chair, that it required the board tender committee that is responsible for that. The IFC is just responsible for the financing part of it.
Could you just tell the chairperson whether the resolution by the IFC, which is the Board Investment and Finance Committee, the one that's appearing at page 058, whether that was the resolution that was taken in response to the submission that you made at page, was made by, at page 054. That would be AP3, please. AP3 and...
AP3.
Yes.
So Chair, the resolution, was that we are mandated to negotiate but not conclude the financing agreement.
And
what were wrong?
Yes. Who mandated you to do that?
That is the board IFC.
Yes. Yeah. And that was signed, could you look at the date?
That was signed on the 21st of the 6th, 2017, and this is an extract of the minutes by Suzanne Daniels.
Then, your understanding then after that was that were you supposed to proceed with the proposal and conclude the proposal? What was your understanding of the resolution by the IFC?
Chair, my understanding was that we can start the negotiations, but we can't conclude that this is an agreement that we can sign. That was my understanding of proceed but not conclude.
Yes.
So you would negotiate up to the level where you would feel confident that if this was signed, it would be good for ESCOM, but you would not sign.
We would not sign.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then you deal then with the corporate plan, which is AP4. Could you just talk to what you say in that corporate plan and why was it necessary and what happened in the preparation of that corporate plan?
Yes, Chair. So the corporate plan, as explained earlier, Chair, was the 5-year plan for ESCOM. We refer here to the corporate plan that was being prepared between January 2017 and for submission to and sign off by the board first and then submission to government during February. During that corporate plan submission, Chair, there was a slight change in what ESCOM was doing. We then introduced private sector participation programs, and in the corporate plan, Chair, there was an allocation made to private sector participation programs in the order of 65 billion of that program, but only about 52 billion in the corporate plan was allocated specifically to private sector participation, Chair.
So, sorry, before we go further in paragraph 13, there's something that I missed in paragraph 12. You deal with the role that Mr. Zetembe Khoza was playing during the time that you presented the submission to the IFC and to the BTC. What was his role there?
So, Chair, at the time, and apologies for going back to what I indicated, is that at this stage, Mr. Khoza is only an ordinary board member. He was the chair of the board tender committee, but he was also a member of the IFC. And what was also, I normally would not attend IFC. Mr. Singh apologized, and because of these particular items, he requested that I participate in the meeting. But in that meeting, Chair, Mr. Khoza made the comment that it's fine, you can bring it to BTC, but we'll approve it.
And
We have approved.
No, we will approve it, it's fine. Yeah.
yes, yes. So this was even before it was brought to the BTC?
Even before it was brought to the BTC.
Yes. And then you were still dealing with what was happening then in the preparation of that corporate plan in paragraph 13.
Yes, so Chair, during the preparation of the corporate plan, there was the introduction of PSPs, and this was new to ESCOM. And the allocation was done, but the PSP program, Chair, was also very interesting from my perspective, that it contained funding and engaging with funders and investors. Certainly my colleagues raised a concern around it. I was concerned about it. I approached Mr. Singh to ask, so why is this outside of the Treasury? He made a comment to the extent that you are too busy with other things. So he has allocated this to a newly formed role under Mr. Prish Govender.
And then who assisted ESCOM in the preparation of the corporate plan?
Chair, at this stage, and I reflected on this comment, if I may, that at this stage it was McKinsey. It was the previous year that it was McKinsey and Trillion.
McKinsey?
It was McKinsey in 2017.
Yes.
But the McKinsey and Trillion assisted us in the corporate plan in 2016.
Yes. And why was it necessary for them to assist ESCOM in drafting its corporate plan?
They were there, brought in as consultants. And I think, Chair, just from my own experience being within the organization, there was the impression created that we are not capable to do this, so we will bring outside helping. And it was also largely my experience of the time that these were the people that assisted Mr. Singh at Transnet. They knew each other very well. And I think that discussion happened. What was also, if I may add, Chair, that we were never formally, as a direct report, sat down and gave instructions to say, these people will help you. That was never the experience.
Yes. Then this, inclusive in the corporate plan, is the funding plan, am I correct?
Yes, Chair.
So how did you draft your funding plan?
So, Chair, the funding plan that we drafted, we as the Treasury, so there's the funding plan in 2016 and the funding plan in 2017. The 2017 funding plan, obviously, at this stage, we drafted that ourselves, but the funding plan in 2016 was the funding plan that we were told by Mr. Singh, or not told by Mr. Singh, as I said earlier, that he did not really share this with us. I was in a meeting, the Trillion and McKinsey representatives were in the meeting, we discussed the corporate plan, and they arrived at our offices in the Treasury to say that they are assisting Mr. Singh and they need certain information.
And was that the first time, to your knowledge, that you got to know that they were going to be involved in the preparation of the plan?
In the meeting, it was clear when we had the discussions with them in the room that broadly they were basically helping us with everything, Chair.
But at the first meeting, where the preparation of the plan was discussed, did Mr. Singh say, I've brought them in for this or that reason, or did they just rock up and nobody asked, why are you here, what are you doing here?
Yes, Chair. Nobody asked. We get into the meeting and the meeting starts and we discuss what has to happen, Chair.
And Mr. Singh would have called that meeting?
He would have called it, he would have chaired it, Chair.
Yes. I assume that being in the meeting, you would have taken it that they were coming with his knowledge or at his invitation.
Yes, Chair.
Because obviously being the chairperson of the meeting, if he didn't know about their coming, he would have asked them to leave or something, or asked them what they were doing there.
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. And whose responsibility was it to draw up the corporate plan and the funding plan?
So it is the Treasury, and I would be largely responsible, not largely, I would obviously have to sign it off for submission into the corporate plan, following discussions with Mr. Singh around that.
Yes. And then is it correct that the funding plan is what appears at page, in fact, the corporate plan as a whole is AP4, Mr. Chairperson, is that thick document. And then the funding plan that you're referring to.
So the corporate plan starts at page 59?
That's correct. At page,
Okay.
yes, at page 60, the actual plan.
Yeah.
And then it goes up to page 383. But a reference is going to be made to certain portions of the funding plan. Thank you. Could you please, Mr. Singh, Mr. Pay, I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. Could you please turn to page 152?
She has apologized, Mr. Clay.
No, Chair, I've been called worse, Chair. I've been called Andre Gupta at some point.
Thank you. If you in fact, you start with page 60. What year financial years are those, as they appear on that page?
Chair, it's for the financial year 2017-18 to 2021-22, Chair.
So that's a 5-year plan.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, thank you. If you turn to page 152, that's where the funding plan is.
What page again?
152, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yes.
What I'd like to find out from you, in the drafting of this funding plan.
Oh, I think he's still looking for it.
Oh, you're still looking for it?
Yeah,
Page
page
152.
152.
152.
There we go. Thank you, Chair.
That's the funding plan that you're talking
Yes,
about?
Chair.
Thank you. Now, in the drafting of this funding plan, are there areas where the Huarong proposal was included?
No, we did not include that in our funding plan, Chair.
Yes, and then if you go to the page 153, This is where you deal with matters such as funding progress. Could you just take the chairperson to what you said when you dealt with the liquidity reserves of Eskom? Just that paragraph.
So the liquidity reserves, Chair, the Eskom deems it prudent to maintain liquidity buffer that covers the average 3-month organizational cash flow requirements. As at 31 December 2016, Eskom had liquidity reserves of 27 billion, and this excludes committed bank facilities of 6.25 billion, which serves as further support to the liquidity buffer.
Yes. And then if you go to page 155, you deal with the utilization of government guarantees and Eskom debt. Could you just highlight the areas that are relevant to your evidence to the chairperson, please?
So, Chair, the relevant is that government has allocated 350 billion to Eskom as part of guarantees. We, at this stage of this report or the funding plan, we have committed 53 billion of that to specific funding, and then we have had available at that stage 97 billion, and what we were negotiating at the time was 82 billion of that 97 billion, Chair.
Yes. And then lastly, under Eskom debt, what did you convey there?
Chair, here we basically just give an overview of the debt of Eskom, and if I may, as at 31 December 2016, the total net interest-bearing debt for the various domestic and international funding sources amounted to 340 billion. Government guaranteed debt currently constitutes 54% of the Eskom total debt and excludes only the drawn portion of the loans and outstanding government guaranteed bonds. The undrawn portions of the loans and unissued bonds are included in the committed government guarantee amount of 253 billion. So we basically just wanted to give an overview of the status of the debt at that particular point in time.
And at that stage, what was the financial position of Eskom? Did it look good to you, or do you feel that you didn't need any help for funding, or was Eskom an ailing entity at that point?
So Chair, at this stage, what happened was that we applied to the regulator for 16% tariff increases from the period 2013 to 2018. The regulator only awarded 8% tariff increases, and that would have had a significant impact on the financial position of Eskom. 2016, I think from if memory serves, Chair, from 2015 onward, it was a very difficult period for Eskom financially. And certainly the funding that we list here, or the liquidity that we list here of 27 billion was fairly high. It showed that in our funding activities we were doing fairly well.
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Chairperson, I've noticed it's 20 past 11. I don't know whether the Chairperson would like to take the tea adjournment.
Okay, we'll take the short adjournment. And we will resume at 25 to 12.
Thank you.
Adjourn. Yes, you may proceed, Ms. Norman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Chairperson, I've requested the witness, I think the figures that he gave when we were dealing with the percentages on the term sheet are not correct. So if, with your permission, I have requested him to recalculate them during the lunch break and just simply
Yes.
submit a piece of paper with
Okay.
all the calculations. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Thank you. Could you please proceed then, Mr. Play, if you go to page 162? There's release of government guarantees. What does that mean, and what is the effect of government guarantees being released? Could you just expand on what is it that you intended to convey there?
Chair, based on apologies, Chair. Based on the corporate plan that we were preparing, that it showed that the financial position over the 5-year period would improve. Therefore, there would be less reliance on government guarantees to secure the funding. And also, Chair, the issue at the time, certainly my impression, given the time that we were doing this, from a political perspective, there was frustration, particularly from Mr. Singh, that we are relying, if we have to use the guarantees, we have to go back to government every time and ask them. And I think it was also the norm at Transnet that they did not have to rely on guarantees. So part of this was largely a frustration that we can't just do whatever we want to do. We constantly have to rely on guarantees. What we did in the Treasury, Chair, under the government release program, was to look at, as the corporate plan and the overall financial position of Eskom improves, how would we be able to source funding on an unguaranteed basis? The difference, Chair, would be two specifically that you would get on a guaranteed basis. It's easier because you know government is standing behind it. And if you do on an unguaranteed basis, you might not get the amounts you were looking for and at the price you were looking for. But that was certainly the move towards unguaranteed portions of debt. Chair, also just important here to note, if I may, that it was also a period where we were looking at, where Eskom was looking at the nuclear project. And guarantees would have been important to secure that. Also, Chair, was at this particular point in time, the guarantee program that we had expired on the 31st of March 2017. So it also expired, and we would have to go to government and ask them to extend it. So those were two critical points related to the release of government guarantees.
But the release of government guarantees basically refers to a position where you were given a government guarantee, but you no longer need it.
Yeah, you don't need it and you don't utilize it.
You are fine financially for purposes of that particular project.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doesn't also having a guarantee, a government guarantee, also used as a safety mechanism, because government knows exactly what you're getting yourself into because it has provided guarantees. Mm-hmm. And the risks that are attached to unsecured, unguaranteed lending, because government doesn't know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. You go and you source funding. There's no guarantee. Government doesn't know how much debt you are amassing at that point. Or am I correct in my understanding of how they work?
Chair, if I may, the use of the government guarantee obviously gives them a better credit quality that is basically standing behind you. And Eskom has two ways. We are implicitly guaranteed because we're a state-owned entity. And we are explicitly guaranteed through these 350. So that's the issue on just going and doing what we want to do without the government guarantees. We have a borrowing program that we submit. Government has to sign that off. So the notion of just going and doing what you want is not really true, because you still have to go to government and say, we are encumbering government Eskom through this facility. So
basically, a government guarantee to an entity such as Eskom is really for purposes of assuring lenders, potential lenders or investors or funders, that if they give you a loan, they will be paid back.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah.
And also, I think important, Chair, is that government is also basically close the abuse of the guarantees, if I can call it that, that it's specific just to our capital program. So we can't use the guarantees to go and raise money for operational purposes such as salaries. But you are correct, Chair.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. And then you then, in paragraph 15, am I correct that you would like to correct the date there that appears in the first sentence of that, instead of 2019 to read 2017? Back to your statement, please. Back to your statement, paragraph 15.
Sorry, please. Which date?
I think we should have a little bit of air conditioner.
Yes, it's a bit hot. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I think some will say more than a little bit.
Thank
Okay,
you.
all right.
Yes, Mr. Pillay?
Chair, just to reference the date, Chair.
The date 14 March 20, is it 2019 or 2017?
No, this is 2017, apologies.
2017. You'd like to correct that date? Okay.
Well, I have it corrected on mine, so I must have corrected it when I was reading the statement.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Here you deal with the signing of another term sheet, am I correct?
Yes, Chair.
And why was it done, and what were the reasons advanced for doing it?
So Chair, in this instance, and this was in March, you may recall, Chair, we traveled to China in January. We have the board meeting that says negotiate but don't conclude. They visit South Africa in the Wurong delegation. Visits South Africa in March, and there's a letter to Mr. Singh that suggests they are here, they would like to have a meeting and sign the term sheet. And this was relayed to us, Chair.
I mean, at that stage, are they still talking about the timesheet, signing the timesheet?
Signing of a binding term sheet. Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
binding one this
Binding.
time. Okay.
And Chair, I think also so we were then given the term sheet. We looked at it, and we wanted to make sure that at least that there's the non-binding elements to it in that term sheet.
And who was giving, who was receiving the timesheet?
So we were receiving the term sheet from Wurong.
Okay, they are proposed timesheet.
Their proposed term sheet for signing.
Yes, yeah.
And they have also tried in their attempt to water it down slightly so that it looks more binding in nature.
Yeah.
We also, we received it, and we were told by Mr. Singh he wants to sign the term sheet. So we, again, Chair, we reviewed it, we looked at it with White and Case, and we were looking at some of the elements in there that still suggest to us this is not, there's some non-binding elements to it.
So largely, was it largely similar or identical to the non-binding one that had been signed, or was there a vast difference between the two?
There was significant difference between the two, Chair.
Yes, okay. The difference is related to any issues of importance that you want to highlight?
Chair, in particular, they took out in the clause the non-binding conditions, they took that out.
Mm-hmm.
What we insisted on was that it still stipulates that the term sheet will be superseded by the signing of the terms would be superseded. There's
Yes.
also indications that it's only indicative, and that what we also insisted on, Chair, was that we maintained that we would need all the government approvals that is required for it.
Thank you.
Is the signing of a timesheet such as this a normal step prior to signing a contract?
No, Chair. It is certainly
a term sheet.
yes,
Actually,
yeah.
it's called a term sheet, not time sheet.
Yeah, it is certainly not normal to us, Chair.
Yes.
And it's not, as I've indicated, Chair, that it was not something that we do as part of our process in the Treasury, that you would sign the term sheet that's binding.
And did you find out, or did you understand what the need was to sign a so-called binding term sheet if in any event there was still going to have to be a contract to be signed?
Chair, it was quite clear that the signing of the binding term sheet suggests that if we sign the binding term sheet, if we sign the contract, the fees as stipulated in the term sheet becomes payable.
Yes.
And that was...
But why not wait until you sign the contract?
Exactly, Chair.
Yeah. Okay.
That was our concern as well. And certainly at this stage, Chair, we relayed that to Mr. Singh, even the concerns of White and Case, we relayed that to him.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Following up on the chairperson's questions, maybe we should go to that term sheet at page 385.
Excuse me, Chair, the...
385. That would be AP5, maybe if you look at the divider. Is that the one that you're referring to? And if you turn to page, I just want to see where the signatures are. Page 394?
394.
Yes. Is that the area where there's signatures?
Yes, Chair.
Who signed that document?
It is signed by Mr. Anot Singh on the 14th of March of the third month in 2017,
Yes.
and Mr. Jinao Bao of the Warong, the chairman of Warong Energy Africa.
Yes. Was it signed here in South Africa?
It was signed in South Africa. It was signed in our offices.
Yes. And if you go to this document, just to highlight certain things, you've told the chairperson that you said it was indicative, but if you look at you read the very first paragraph just under the shaded area, that's got approximately 1.5 billion US dollars. Could you just read that into the record, please?
The parties agree that this term sheet shall create legally binding obligations on each party and shall be in full force and effect upon its signature until such time as the asset loan agreement and the other related definitive agreements are concluded between the parties, unless inconsistent with the context or safe where the contrary is expressly indicated. A reference to a party includes the party's successors in title and permitted assigns and nominees.
Yes. And if you go to paragraph 5 on the same page, what does it read?
It indicates in the introduction, please note the terms and conditions set out in the term sheet are indicative in nature and do not purport to summarize all the conditions, covenants, and other provisions that would be contained in the definitive legal document, which shall be satisfactory to all parties.
Yes. Just above the signatures at page 394, could you just read what's contained in there? Kindly, beginning with kindly.
Kindly sign the space provided, thereby accepting the terms and conditions of the term sheet.
Yes. So what were the reasons given by Mr. Singh when he wanted to have this signed?
So Chair, the reasons here was, I've explained the context and the concerns that we had, and his view again was, it's a non-binding term sheet, they are here, it shows our cooperation, so we can sign.
And when it was being signed or about to be signed, was this referred to your internal legal department?
No.
Well, when he said that to you, didn't you point out that right at the beginning it says quite clearly it's binding?
Yeah, he was aware of that, Chair. I mean,
Yeah.
From the first term sheet, he was aware of our reservations and concerns around this.
But he still said it was not
It's
binding.
not binding. He was comfortable with it, Chair.
Did he explain to you the basis, his basis for saying it's not binding when it clearly says it is binding?
No, Chair.
He never explained. And you said your concerns with it were mainly that it still had non-binding features, or what were your concerns again, if you can articulate them again?
My concerns were, is obviously the binding elements to it, but the comfort that I took, Chair, was the non-binding commitments as indicated.
Yes. So those elements which you regarded as non-binding, the fact that they were non-binding was to ESCOM's advantage, because then ESCOM was not going to be bound legally by them. But are you saying there were non-binding features because the document said so somewhere in regard to certain specific features, or is it their nature that makes you say they were non-binding? Why do you say there are some non-binding features?
So, Chair, certainly my understanding or interpretation of this, it was as per paragraph 5. Please note that the terms and conditions set out in the term sheets are indicative in nature and do not purport to summarize all the conditions and covenants, warranties, and other provisions. So there, what was the concern was and we, subsequent to this, continue to engage were wrong on this, in particular the fees related to this facility, Chair.
I'm sorry, from what page were you reading?
385, Chair.
Right at the bottom.
Yes, Chair.
Please note that the terms and conditions set out in this term sheet are indicative in nature, that is one, and do not purport to summarize all the conditions, covenants, warranties, and other provisions which would be contained in definitive legal documentation, which shall be satisfactory to all parties. Two are in respect of certain special conditions which are in addition to other standard terms and conditions typical of the transaction of this nature, and remains subject to completion of requisite due diligence, constitute a statement of mutual intent of the parties with respect to the contemplated transaction. Well, the last part I read seems to suggest that maybe this document may have been intended to be a document indicating a serious intention between the parties to conclude an agreement in the future. But that first, that opening portion, which says it's binding, then goes against that. So it seems to have some inconsistencies within itself. Okay, but you say that what gave you comfort was what I've read, part of what I've read.
That, Chair, and also, if I may, the Roman numeral 3.
Yes.
That states, constitute a statement of mutual intent of the parties with respect to the contemplated transaction and does not contain all matters upon the agreement which must be reached in order for any transaction to be consummated, and therefore does not constitute a binding commitment with respect to the transactions, although undertakings set forth in confidentiality and other will be binding upon the parties.
So that last bit you have read seems to suggest that there are certain parts of the document that are binding and other parts that are not binding. The ones under confidentiality and other are binding. Okay, all right. So maybe that is what Mr. Singh also based his view on.
I'm not sure, Chair. Certainly that was...
it's possible.
Yes.
It's possible that he also looked at what you looked at, and for that reason, for the same reason as you, thought, well, it's not binding. So that's possible, it seems to me.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then if you go to page 386 of that same document, paragraph 7 or clause 7 thereof, if you read that, what does it say?
Notwithstanding the foregoing, however, in the event of cancellation of the proposed financing agreements after signing this term sheet, the cancellation fee referred to below will immediately become due, owing and payable by ESCOM.
What page is that? What clause?
Page 386, Mr. Chairman.
Number 7.
Number 7, that's correct.
Okay, all right.
Yes. So it says the cancellation fee becomes due, owing and payable if you cancel.
Yes, Chair.
Yes. And then it goes back to the amounts that we had read earlier on the percentages that we were supposed to pay of the amount that was to be.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, because those amounts, that's 0.2% that you spoke about earlier. Now, you look at this, you are told that we are going to sign this term sheet, and you look at these conditions, you are concerned about them. Why didn't you go to your legal department internally? I'm not talking about outside legal advice. I'm talking about internally. Why didn't you at that point say to legal, Mr. Singh says you must sign this thing. I've got some concerns about it. These terms might not be favorable to ESCOM. Why didn't you do that at that point?
Chair, so at this stage, I admit that we relied on White and Case for that. The other aspect, Chair, that's also important, at this stage, the legal of ESCOM also reports into Mr. Singh, largely. And he was aware of the fact that we required this legal assistance. He agreed that we can rely on White and Case for that.
Yes. Thank you. We are going to deal with the White and Case advice shortly. So then this gets signed. And what was then the next step after the signing of the second term sheet? Now we have the first one that was signed in December. Now we have the second one that's also signed. And the percentages, if I'm correct, they remain the same on the clauses that we referred to earlier. Am I correct? That is the percentages to be paid for due diligence, for cancellation, yes, for commitment fees, all of those remain the same. Okay, thank you. And then thereafter, what happened?
So, Chair, it was signed. The process that was followed, still based on the process that I followed, based on the board resolution, was negotiate and don't conclude. So even the term sheet, Chair, we discussed that even after the signing by Mr. Singh, there was still, up until the last point, unhappiness with some of these, or discontent with some of the terms, particularly the financing of that. And we raised it with White and with Warong at the time. So certainly from my perspective, the board resolution was negotiate but don't conclude. That was my approach to it. And if I may, Chair, also just, if I may, Chair, just context. The one thing that, and this is a personal, being in the organization at the time, is a couple of points, Chair, is that Mr. Singh was going to sign this thing regardless of what I say.
Yeah.
That was my experience. But also an issue at the time, Chair, was I was responsible for the Treasury. In that particular, earlier that month, he arrived in the office. I was sitting in a meeting with external people. He arrived in the office and handed me an envelope. And his words to me were, "Here's a love letter for you." I concluded on the meeting, but was quite anxious to see what's in the letter, in the envelope. In the envelope was the financial profile of one of my colleagues called Marius Homewood. I looked at it and went to his office to ask, what is the situation with this letter? His words to me were, tell him to leave. You must get rid of him. And there was no basis for
that. That was somebody reporting to you?
That reported to me at the time. And the instruction was you must get rid of him.
What was his name again?
Marius Homewood.
Yes.
So he instructed that you must get rid of him. I took it quite serious, Chair,
And from your point of view, this was like out of the blue?
It was out of the blue, but I will give context here. It was part of what we saw in the organization happening. My predecessor may have been the same situation. There was another colleague that was, even though in the public domain we present this as if it's amicable and agreed to, that people would leave because they are not willing to cooperate. And this was the similar situation with Mr. Homewood. In an executive forum of probably 300 people, at least a chair, the discussion around this corporate plan that we discuss now, and there was a particular question around the release of government guarantees that we discussed earlier, and he asked someone from Treasury. I was unfortunately not there. He asked Mr. Homewood to give a response, and Mr. Homewood was quite clear that we can only achieve this if you, as, in my own words, Chair, if you as the leadership fix this place. And that's my own words. And I don't think that Mr. Singh took it quite well, and that was the basis of coming and saying to me, get rid. So that was the environment that we were working in. It was also reflective of the, at some point, so when my predecessor left, Chair, the treasurer of Eskom would chair the ALCO, the Assets and Liability Committee. When Mr. Singh arrived, he proposed to chair those meetings. And in some of those meetings, he would tell us as the treasury team, if you can't do this, I will get other people to do what I want. And that was the environment that we were in, Chair. And just to give some context, that he would sign it regardless of what we would say about it. And if you don't cooperate, that might be your fate. So there was also consistently throughout that period an element of self-preservation, and also, Chair, maybe a bit of overconfidence from my side to think that if you leave, they're going to bring people in that will do whatever they want to do. I just wanted to give that context, Chair.
And what was the name of your predecessor?
Her name was Caroline Henry, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've dealt with annexures AP7 and AP8. Those are the letters you exchanged between the Hwarong group after your trip to China. If you go to paragraph 16, this is where we deal with the White and Case advice, and I would like to go to that because of what is it that they communicated very clearly to Eskom. Mm-hmm. Am I correct that you met with these lawyers according to what they say, on the 12th of March 2017? Or you met with them before that date?
Yes, Chair. Chair, through you.
AP9, I beg your pardon. It's AP9. AP9, that would be page 407.
Yes, Chair.
Where did you meet them?
I met them in London, and this was an introductory meeting. Mr. Singh and I met, and we had meetings to see investors in London. They came to the hotel that where we were staying, and to discuss this particular transaction.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
What is that? The Hwarong transaction or another transaction?
This particular transaction and what they were assisting us on, Chair.
Oh, or a different transaction?
No, this Hwarong transaction. Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Only the Hwarong transaction?
Yes, to my knowledge, yes. That
yes.
was what...
Yes. On that page...
And I'm sorry, did they represent Hwarong?
No, they were representing us, Chair.
Oh, they were representing you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hwarong was represented by Norton Rose at the time.
Okay.
Assisted them.
Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, the comments that they make are very important to what we are going to be dealing with later on. With your leave, may I just ask the witness to read most of those?
That's fine.
Thank you. Could you please read from what they say to you? This was written to you by Mr. Adrian Lawrence. Yes. Could you just read out what he says in that letter? In that email, sorry. So
in the email was from Mr. Lawrence on the 12th of March at 22 minutes past 10 to Andre Pillay, and he CC'd his colleague Stuart Matty, Hwarong term sheet. Dear Andre, It was great meeting you on Friday, and as mentioned, please find below some initial thoughts on the term sheet. As discussed, it would be helpful if you would provide details of Warong, other personnel you have met, and this would give some better sense of Warong China subsidiary involvement. You will note below, we have also suggested Warong, HEA to be requested to provide further information to this in this regard. Given this would appear to be a first one of the first moves of China Warong outside of China into Africa, senior involvement would be likely. Please do let me know if anything further at this stage would be helpful.
Yes. And following that, they raised some concerns about it. Could you just highlight what those were?
Chair, so they, when they looked at the term sheet, Chair, and this was, if we look at the time, this was now before the signing of the term sheet. As discussed, the term sheet is onerous on Eskom and ambiguous at best as to what is being offered by HEA, and so our strong advice is not to sign at this stage. This is particularly the case given it is expressed to be binding and provides for a high cancellation fee, which is highly unusual. Instead of looking at the markup of the term sheet, it may make sense to consider clarifying certain key thresholds queries at this stage, including the term sheet status by HEA has been set up to provide asset finance solutions for Eskom. Further details should be requested. The background to Warong setting up a subsidiary before discussions with Eskom commenced, and what does the subsidiary will be doing other than dealing with Eskom. The term sheet states Warong, China Warong is a parent company of HEA. HEA should provide a structure diagram and details of the background of its directors to justify this. Noted that HEA does not appear to be a China Warong subsidiary on its website. HEA is stated as the lender for the 1.5 billion up to 6 billion. HEA should identify the source of these funds and when and how they will be communicated. Should I continue?
Yes, please.
So the term sheet states HEA has the interest of international funders and investors, including CDB. Does this mean that China Warong is not funding HEA? It seems unlikely. HEA, CDB, i.e. CDB would fund through HEA for the on-lending, and so then is HEA simply an arranger equally? Would i.e. CDB accept the due diligence of HEA? Will China Warong guarantee the obligations of HEA? Who will guarantee the obligations of the SPV to EPC contractors? Who will cover cost overruns, construction risk, delays? To be closely examined by HEA, what HEA brings to Eskom. It appears, it appears any certainty of construction cost is through the arrangement of specific EPC contractor turnkey EPCM model mentioned in the term sheet, and so will be priced in that by the EPC contractor. It is unclear that HEA will be bringing money to the structure. If HEA is simply providing a ranger service, it should be judged, including as to the track record in comparison to other arrangers and priced on that basis. Eskom to consider carefully the involvement of HEA in EPC arrangement, given Eskom is ultimately paying the projects, and it is Eskom's projects that are involved. In particular, noted that HEA looks at pre-approved EPC contractors, and Eskom could have concerns with i.e. all Chinese EPC contractor tenders, and then HEA reserves the right to take the final decision on selecting the EPC contractor. Presumably the 4 EPC contractors and 1 EPC company HEA referred to would happily deal with Eskom directly, and so access arranged by HEA replicates what Eskom can do also. The structure contemplated is effectively a limited recourse structure financing with possessory security in HEA would hold the shares in the SPV and will hold the finance assets during the duration of the loan with various other security features, i.e. escrow accounts, to be considered. Further, how much secured financing will fit in with Eskom's undertakings with other lenders, i.e. negative pledge issues. The term sheet appears to be a blend of various different concepts and ideas and terms from other sources and does not fit together very well. past experience HEA and/or its personnel in banking such structures to be confirmed. Term sheet, key financial terms. The financial terms appear onerous generally, including based on 1.5 billion were applicable.
Sorry, no, I'm just going to ask him to just highlight the concerns just in terms of topics, because we've dealt already with the percentages. So if you just, the cancellation fee was one of the matters that they were concerned about.
So Chair, so the financial terms, the key financial terms, they raise concerns with that, and the financial structure, they raise concerns with those.
Yes. So they raised the cancellation fee expressly. They raised a signature fee of the alpha, the due diligence fee, annual commitment fees, interest rates, security deposit. So all of an early prepayment. So all of these matters are raised by White and Case.
Yes.
Yes. So this I see is 2 days before the signing of the term sheet. Am I correct? So this was addressed to you.
Yes.
So who did you give this document to when you received it?
So Chair, it was CC so it was to me. The term sheet, I forward this to, I think, to my colleague, Ngadila Shweni, the document. I may have sent this to him, but I've also discussed this document with Mr. Singh. He was in London when we met with him. He joined the discussion, introductions took place, and I raised that this is the concerns that they were raising.
Yes. Now, from the reading of the White and Case summary, as you've put it, there is nothing in the term sheet that addresses these concerns. Am I right?
At the term sheet?
The signed one.
The signed one, no.
Yeah. So what it means is that although they had alerted you and Mr. Anuj Singh to these concerns, the term sheet was signed in the manner in which it was and in the manner in which they were criticizing.
Yes, and with those non-binding elements as indicated.
No, what I'm trying to understand is where in this email from White and Case is it indicated that you could sign that, or that term sheet could be signed, because you didn't sign it, but where is it indicate that it could be signed?
So not in this term sheet. There's an email from them, correspondence from them that they've highlighted some of the changes to the term sheet.
Yes. No, but in this one, there is nothing that says.
It's not here.
In fact, in this one, it's actually cautioning you not.
No, it's certainly saying don't go ahead.
Yes, but then 2 days later, that was signed.
Signed.
Thank you. And you say Mr. Singh was at this meeting. These concerns that they raised in the letter, were those raised the same concerns were raised at the meeting?
At the meeting, the high-level concerns in terms of conceptually what they were unhappy with. But these concerns I certainly raised with him in terms of the specifics of what they were concerned about.
Yes. And at what point, if at any point, was this ever shared with your legal internal?
It was shared with our legal internal at a later stage. So what happened, Chair, was so after the term sheet signing, and again I refer back to, I was in the IFC board meeting. The only, and not even Mr. Singh, the board for me is the ultimate decision maker. The board said to me, I was in that meeting, I represented, negotiate but not conclude.
Yes.
Yes.
And I took that, I agreed with Mr. Singh, even though there was these concerns, the board said I must negotiate but not conclude, and the intention was to resolve some of these issues. If we could not resolve it, then we go back to the board and say, we can't resolve certain issues, we are not happy to proceed.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, let's move forward then. You mention in paragraph 16.
Are you going back to his statement?
To his statement, I beg your pardon, yes, Mr. Chairman, page 6. You mentioned Mr. Koko in the last sentence of that paragraph. What are you saying about him there?
So, Chair, the situation at the time was we are going to sign. It is not. It is non-binding. It is just a show of the cooperation. At this stage, Mr. Koko was the CEO, the interim CEO of Eskom.
That is now you are talking about what you say in paragraph 16 of your statement.
Yes.
16, Chair, towards the end.
Yes, okay, all right.
So the
So Mr. Singh's attitude was, Mr. Anuj Singh, his attitude towards the term sheet was that it was to be signed, it was going to be signed.
signed, yes, yeah.
And Mr. Gogo's attitude was also that it was to be signed.
To be signed.
Yeah, okay.
Chair, and just for completeness, is that after the review, as I've explained, I sent an email with this to Mr. Singh to say, given the looking at the non-binding nature, he was going to sign it in any case, regardless of my inputs. This is the term sheet for signing.
So in your memo that you are talking about, are you saying you forwarded the term sheet to him
With the amendments,
with these amendments that you were suggesting?
yes,
Okay.
based on the Whitehead case advice.
Yes, okay. But did you say anything about what your attitude is to, at that stage, to it being signed? I know that earlier you had made your position clear, but when you were sending that memo, did you
Yeah.
include that as well, what your attitude was? Did you say, well, sign if
No,
you
no,
want
Chair.
to sign, or I
We-
still say don't sign, or you just said nothing about signing or not signing?
I said this is for signing, this is the term sheet.
Yes,
From what I can recall, Chair.
yes.
Also, Chair, what was my concern, and maybe I must allow for the process, Chair, to deal with that element.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But you say that as at that stage, and probably earlier than that, your understanding was that your view as to whether it should or should not be signed was not going to change anything.
No, it was not going to change it. Sorry, Chair.
Yes, yes. Okay, all right. Thank you.
And
Thank
Chair, to confirm, if I may, that my discussion and negotiations with White and Case was certainly to address all those issues.
Yes.
The concerns of White and Case, our own concerns,
Yes.
the structure of it,
Yes.
the process that followed was certainly to deal with that.
Yes, okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then in paragraph 17, could you tell the chairperson what then the next plan was?
So, Chair, again, back to the resolution that I had, this was the information that we took to the meeting, the board meeting of February, was the resolution negotiate.conclude, and this was on an RFI basis. ESCOM, following its processes, Chair, does not conclude anything, it was introduced to me that you can contract from an RFI. I was very uncomfortable with it. I engaged with with the commercial colleagues, and I was very uncomfortable. I made it known to Mr. Singh, we are not going to proceed until we do an RFP.
Yes.
And that was issued after the signing of this indicative term sheet. An RFP still to follow the process.
Okay.
But then this follows a day after you were given the advice by White and Case.
Sorry, it looks like nobody has done anything about the aircon.
That's also my feeling, Mr. Chairperson. I don't know, but I see.
I don't hear you. But how do you know that? Is there no electricity? Since when? Well, can you SMS? Have you got Stemela's number? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Well, I think there was a report back ready to be given to me as soon as there was a break for me to be given.
Yes.
I'm told that apparently there is no electricity now. We are operating on the basis of a generator, and that apparently there is no aircon when we operate like that. So I don't know whether Mr. Pillay can do anything about that.
I'll try my best during the break, Chair.
Well, it's interesting that we haven't had load shedding for some time until when we are hearing witnesses from ESCOM. All right, we will make do with what we can. Okay,
Yes.
all right, let's proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question that I put to you was, this proposal that you can't contract without having an RFP happens a day after the meeting with White and Case. And apparently, a day after you'd received communication, at least,
Yes.
from White and Case.
Yes.
Now, who did you intend at this point to contract with?
Sorry, Chair, just clarify.
At this point, who did you intend to contract with?
So at this stage, Chair, the RFP went out to the market again.
Yes.
So we received the initial RFIs, and this was now to see what RFP responses do we get back.
Yes.
And we certainly, I think if the wrong transaction was not part of the RFP, from our process would not have been entertained. But it was for the wider market RFP, but not just bespoke for a particular, it was not a closed RFP.
But did the RFP mean that Warong could also make proposals?
Yes,
It
Chair.
was open to anybody.
It was open to anybody, Chair, and my insistence was that they must submit, even though they are now following this seemingly parallel process, they must submit because our legal process dictate that we should do that. And they did so, Chair.
So this feature of these steps that were taken relating to the signing of this term sheet created the impression, at least, that it was intended that a contract would be signed with them. Is that right? Would you say that's a fair comment?
That was certainly their expectation, Chair.
Yeah.
I don't know what Mr. Singh's expectation was at the
Yeah.
time as my superior, but
Yeah.
it's certainly not my expectation.
Yeah.
We had to follow the due process.
Yes, but what I'm saying is when one looks at the terms of the term sheet, it doesn't seem to me why you would sign the term sheet if you don't contemplate that you may or will sign a contract in due course with that entity. Do you understand that?
Yes, Chair.
Any entity with whom you sign this type of term sheet could legitimately say to somebody, we are having discussions with ESCOM with a view to signing a contract. Isn't it? Where anyone who reads what's written there would be justified in thinking that it looks like there's a contemplation, at least, that there might be a contract between the two, depending on the discussions and negotiations that might follow, and maybe other things.
Yes, Chair.
Do you think that's a fair
Yes, Chair.
comment to make?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
And would you say that having that kind of arrangement, as expressed in that term sheet, is inconsistent with a process where other people are invited to make proposals unless they are also going to go through the same process of term sheets?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah.
And as, if I may, Chair, it is also uncommon for us to sign term sheets.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But I would like you, Mr. Pillay, to read the reasons why at this point you were suggesting that there must be an RFP that had to be issued. Because it's quite specific as to why you felt that a particular In fact, please just read it without me putting words into your mouth. Could you just read paragraph 17?
Paragraph 70, ESCOM also maintained that it cannot contract from an RFI process and that the proposal had to be subjected to an RFP process. I engaged Mr. Singh on this matter and we issued an RFP to the market on 13 March 2017. ESCOM's treasury indicated that it has established the appointment of a supplier for innovative finance solution could be made on the RFPs issued, hence the RFP was issued.
Yes. Then whose proposal were you
Sorry,
referring
could
to?
not. Sorry.
Yeah, could not, yes. Whose proposal were you referring to in that paragraph?
Process that that the proposal had to be, on this specific one, Chair, was the wrong one.
Yes.
That-
So, in other words, you're saying to them, you can't contract with Huarong.
This is to Mr. Singh.
Yes, to Mr. You're saying to Mr. Singh, you can't contract with Huarong until you've gone the RFP route.
So
Is that what you are conveying there?
what we wanted to convey that general process is that you can't contract from an RFP, an RFI. That is my understanding of the
You
process.
must go through an RFP
Everyone
first.
must go through, it
Yeah.
doesn't, regardless of who you are and how you came in, you need to go through that process.
Yes. But then the last sentence says, ET indicated they established that the appointment of a supplier for the innovative finance solution could not be made on the RFI issued, hence the RFP was issued. Now, who were you referring to? Who was the supplier for the innovative finance solution there?
So the innovative finance solution, remember the RFP was issued for innovative financing solution.
Yes. And then does the proposal of Huarong fit in within that concept?
Yes.
Okay. So everything that we have in that paragraph, the proposal, and we know the substance of that proposal,
Yes.
that fits in within what you are proposing, that do an RFP.
Yes.
Okay.
Following upon my earlier
Yes.
question, was it wrong for a term sheet to be signed with anybody in terms of ESCOM processes if ultimately the transaction is one that required an RFP?
It certainly, Chair, I can confirm that it is not ESCOM process.
It was wrong.
Yes.
In that situation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then what became of that RFP process?
So the RFP process was issued, we received the responses, and following from the responses, the Huarong proposal was still in that. It was still one of the proposals, Chair, that the board resolution, we did not go back to the board. It was part of the proposals that was evaluated and shortlisted, so we continued as on the board proposal to negotiate but not conclude.
Now, then in paragraph 18, you deal with the memorandum by Mr. Khalid Kasim. What was the purpose of that memorandum?
The Chair, and just for clarification, this is now a period from March. Mr. Singh has now left the organization. Mr. Kasim is now the acting financial officer, appointed at the end of July. So this is an initiative by Huarong, and certainly one of those initiatives, Chair, that there was a BRICS summit happening in China. Our interim CEO, Mr. Johnny Dladla, and the chairman, Mr. Zatembe Khoza, was scheduled to attend the BRICS summit. And in the run-up to the summit, we were presented or discussed with Huarong. I participated in the meeting. There was a scheduled meeting between myself and Mr. Rajiv Thomas to discuss this binding, non-binding cooperation agreement. But certainly in his email as well, Chair, his emphasis was on the signing of the cooperation agreement, but also the signing of the loan agreement. In our discussion, I removed the signing of the loan agreement because we have not gone through our full processes. Also, we looked at the cooperation agreement to make sure that it does not contain any commitment whatsoever. Our internal legal has looked at it. White and Case has looked at it, and they reviewed it to make sure that it does not bind anyone, because my personal experience in the term sheets would not want to be repeated here. And we removed the insistence from them to sign the loan agreement. Also, Chair, important to highlight here is that during the trip and before the trip, Mr. Johnny Dladla and Mr. Singh, it would have certainly been inappropriate for me to string them along. We highlighted to them the risks and the issues that we've been having with this transactions, particularly the signing of the term sheets. Fortunately, Mr. Dladla and Mr. Kasim at this stage agreed with us. And when they got to China, the process with these term sheets, Chair, they follow a diplomatic process or bureaucratic process where the term sheet that is agreed upon goes through the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. It makes its way through formally to the various presidents that would sign off on it, whatever form or whatever document it is. And that was the intention, and that was largely driven by the Wrong group. They were driving that whole process. Mr. Dladla, Chair, in the process of departing, we engaged with him, and he was certainly in agreement with us. So this agreement ended up not being signed. This cooperated agreement of cooperation, Chair.
Yes. From what you're saying, then you said, look, because your processes, that is the Treasury or ESCOM processes, had not been completed, therefore no agreement could be signed except for the cooperation one that was proposed. But then there is correspondence marked AP11, where ESCOM applied for exchange control approval from the Reserve Bank on the 31st of July 2017. Now, this happens 3 days after the proposal of the cooperation agreement. At this point, that is when the approval is sought from SAB, had all the processes that you referred to earlier in your evidence, had they been completed?
No, so Chair, this is with signing of international agreements with foreign currency, we would have to seek SAB approval for that. And that was part of the process as part of my initial board resolution to sign and negotiate and not sign. We had to get SAB approval for that. And that is normal for international transactions.
No, but my understanding is that you had not reached agreement on the transaction at that point.
Yes, so what we normally would do, we would do a high-level submission to the SAB, basically to say this is the transaction, they must review the transaction, and they gave us that approval, Chair.
Yes. That approval, did it have conditions?
Yes, there were conditions to that, Chair.
What were the conditions?
The conditions of that, Chair, was the fact that it must be other conditions, if I may read in paragraph 20, amongst other conditions from the Currency and Exchange Manual of the authorized dealers was that no upfront fee or commitment fee, raising fee, or other administration fees was payable by the borrower. Those were the conditions.
Yes.
And now, Chair,
sorry.
No, please.
Yes, you may proceed, sorry.
No, it's...
Now, then you get the approval from SAB as in AP11. Was this then paving the way for the signing of the agreement between ESCOM and Hwarong?
No, certainly not, Chair. We did not even have a legal review of this agreement. We did not have, because there were elements of this that would need government approval. There was an SPV element, a special purpose vehicle element. There was our internal sign-off. We also in the Treasury had to review the cost of this facility. Even though in the board submissions I indicated at a high level that given the pricing, the specific pricing, not all the fees, I was fairly comfortable in my high level assessment of it. But those were certain steps that we still had to follow. Our process dictates that we negotiate, we conclude, and then we go through our Assets and Liability Committee process that would then look at all the documents and then suggest to the CFO or who is delegated to sign off to say, we are happy, we support, you can sign. And that step did not happen, so the SAB was part of that process that we had to
Yes.
undertake.
And then in paragraph 20, you deal with those conditions that SAB had placed.
Yeah.
Could you just mention them without reading them?
So Chair, the one was that there has to be, money has to flow into the ESCOM's account. The financing was based on a turnkey principle whereby wrong engineers construct and provide financing in a special purpose vehicle, and that is set up, built an asset, the asset required by ESCOM. Therefore, funds will flow from the lenders to the investors as arranged by Warong into the SPV.
Yes. So, in other words, they're saying you must wait until you've got funds into your South African account.
We would have to have funds in our account.
You know,
yes.
before you could conclude any agreement with
yes,
Warong.
yes.
And at that point, no monies were paid.
Monies were paid, and certainly in my mind, Chair, we did not review, we did not complete our processes. From the RFP process, we did not complete our process.
Thank you. And then on the 14th of August, you received a memo from Ms. Gabriela Palacios Flask from your internal legal, which was addressed to Ms. Suzanne Daniels. What were her concerns? We have it in AP12, and that's page 436. Maybe she gives a background, if you're there, about the transaction as a whole. But in the end, she makes certain recommendations. Maybe you could just read those recommendations to the chairperson. They appear at page 440 to 441.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, Chair, the recommendation is that it is recommended that the Group Executive Legal and Compliance reviews the submission from Group Capital to the IFC regarding the Warong Asset Management Project and oppose any approvals if such are against legal advice or set out in the memorandum. Request reasons from the relevant signatories and officials as to why the binding term sheet was signed without following proper legal governance processes, and request reasons as to why the Group Capital and ESCOM Treasury persisted with the wrong transaction funding despite legal advice regarding the terms and ADFA and the fee letter.
Now, what were the processes that she was talking about for the signing of the binding term sheet in paragraph 12.2?
So Chair, as I've indicated, there is no process for signing a binding term sheet. I think at least you would have legal consideration of it, but there was no formal process in our processes that would inform how do you sign a binding term sheet because it was unprecedented.
And the matters that she was raising here, did you find that there was merit in these recommendations, or you felt that, look, there was no reason to worry about them?
Chair, and certainly my view and the timing of it is also important, because on the 15th of August we go to the committee again. I was, some of the responses from White and Case. White and Case raised their issues with me personally. I was comfortable that they, in an independent way, write to our legal to raise these issues. I was also comfortable with the review by our corporate finance on the structure, because in my mind, that is the process that we need to follow. We were not beholden to the transaction. We wanted the process to follow and come to a logical conclusion. Do we do it or not? So I was not concerned about it. I was comfortable with the comments that it shows people are applying their mind, and if we agree to it, there's no sense that we would create to Warong that we are dealing outside of process or we have agendas with their proposal, Chair.
Yes. And then the very next day, you appear or you make a submission to the IFC board. Am I correct?
Yes, Chair.
And what did you ask?
Chair, this was
Where are you now?
I beg your pardon, Mr. Chairman.
In the statement?
In the
Are you back in the
statement,
statement?
we're back. Yes, we are on page 7, paragraph 22.
Okay.
And the reference is to AP 13 that appears at page 443. Could you just read out to the chairperson what is it that you sought from the board, from the IFC board?
Excuse me, Chair, the reference?
Page 443,
AP.
double 43. It's AP 13.
Well, before you read there while you are checking, may I confirm that the Chief Financial Officer would be the head of Treasury at ESCOM, or whether he would be or she would be separate from Treasury?
So the head of Treasury would report into the Chief Financial Officer, Chair.
Also, so there is a head of Treasury.
Yes,
And then there would be
Yes.
the Chief Financial Officer.
Yes, Chair.
And at the relevant time, you were the
Head of
the head of Treasury.
Yes.
You still are.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Could you proceed then, Mr. Play?
So Chair, the resolution requested here, Chair, was the IFC board mandates ESCOM Treasury to conclude a financing agreement with the associated agreements amounting to 1.5 to 6 billion, delegate the power and authority to the Chief Executive Officer to or equivalent.
And what this submission, if you look at page 445, you prepared the submission, am I correct?
Yes, Chair.
And it was signed by the group executive on, according to this, on the 14th of August,
So day before.
2017.
Yeah.
Because the meeting was on the 15th, is that correct?
Yes, Chair.
Yes. So,
The group executive there being Mr. Anuj Singh.
No, here he was replaced, Chair. He left the organization on the 27th of July.
This was now
This is Mr. Caleb Kassim.
who succeeded him during that period. So otherwise, he would have been the one who to sign here if he had still been
Yes,
around.
yes, Chair.
Okay, all right.
could you go to page of the same transaction submission? If you go to page 445 on top, could you just read what you were motivating there?
The approval of the transaction will contribute towards the alternative funding initiatives as contemplated in corporate plan, which includes the borrowing plan of 337 billion for that particular period from 2017-18 to 2021-22.
Yes. And then in paragraph 3.4, you indicate that a due diligence will be done on this company or on the engineering companies.
So Chair, this is part of the process that we would need to follow, that we would still have to conclude. Still, the loan agreement and facility agreement would be reviewed by our head of legal for sign-off, and his delegate, the environmental issues, and also that ESCOM has not contracted with EPC contractors, and that is something that we would have to look at.
Yes. And then thereafter, you deal with your interactions then with, again, with Mr. Koza, which you had already mentioned earlier. Could you just briefly state to the chairperson what you wanted to convey in that paragraph?
Chair, if I may, Chair, the outcome of this board resolution, Chair, is as was pointed out, Chair, that it was signed on the 14th, the meeting was on the 15th. I engaged with Mr. Caleb Kassim, who was the new CFO around us. He was literally into his job probably more than 2 weeks. I was not comfortable with the transaction. We went to the board and we indicated, we left with a resolution that says, go and do a review of the process, follow process. Sorry, Chair.
Yes, in paragraph 22, you mentioned Mr. Zetembe Koso. Why did you mention him there? At page 8 of your statement.
So, Chair, what at this stage, what is quite clear to me that Mr. Koza was quite involved in the process if I can refer to it respectfully as an invincible hand in this whole thing.
And at this stage, he was still just a member of the board and not chairperson.
If memory serves, he was the chairman at
He
this
was
stage.
by this time.
By this time. So
Okay.
at this stage, Chair, if you look at the minutes, there was a change in the board. There were some replacements that the minister effected.
Yes.
So there was a couple of changes. There was a new CEO, a new CFO,
Yes.
and in this instance also a new chair of the IFC committee, Mr. Simpiwe Dinga.
Now, I know that in terms of what we have been told, that there was a time when Mr. Brian Molefe came in, and I think around the same time, more or less, Mr. Anoch Singh came in. Are those the people you are talking about, or are you referring to other people when you say there was a new CEO and a new CFO?
So Chair, this is in 2017 August.
Oh, okay.
And in July, Mr. Singh left the employment of Eskom.
Yes.
And Mr. Molefe, I think he left if memory serves,
Yes.
in November 2016, Chair.
Yes, okay, no, that's fine. So as at this time that you're talking about, who was the CEO or acting CEO?
At this specific point was Mr. Johnny Dladla, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And when Mr. Anoch Singh left, then he was replaced by, I think you have mentioned the name.
Caleb Kassem, Chair.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You've already dealt with, we've already dealt with the Whiten case matter. We're not going to refer to that again. But again, Ms. Palacios writes again on the 22nd of August, 2017, raising similar concerns. They're relevant, they're similar to the ones that she had raised in the earlier memo. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair.
Yes. And then on the 13th of September, Mr. Mohammed Khan also directed a memo where he raised various concerns from the funding side, saying that this appeared to be very expensive. It was going to be a very expensive transaction. For transaction for Eskom. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair.
Yes. And then when these matters were raised, I would imagine that you were copied to these memos, in these memos, and then did you bring them to the attention of the persons that were responsible for the signing of the contemplated agreements?
Yes, Chair. So this was shared with Mr. Kassem. And also importantly, Chair, was this was part of the process that had to follow, that legal had to give their opinion, and this was subsequent to the meeting, the IFC meeting of the 15th that said, go and follow your processes.
Yes. And then in Mr. Khan's memorandum, which appears as AP 16, but at page 471, he has some conclusions there. Could you just take the chairperson through those?
At what page?
At page 471, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
At page 471? Yes. What are the matters that he highlights there?
So he highlights the financial comparison of traditional funding options versus the wrong proposal indicates that the wrong proposal is more expensive relative to Eskom's traditional sources of funding, where Eskom can also contract a fully wrapped EPC on an EPC basis. The high-level review of the term sheet also indicates that certain provisions provide rights of wrong that could result in risk being borne by Eskom that Eskom is unable to mitigate. Given the cost implications, risks and uncertainty around the legal, commercial and regulatory aspects as detailed in 3.4 above, the overall conclusion is the proposed wrong solution is onerous and more expensive than Eskom's traditional sources of funding. It is therefore recommended that all funding options should be exhausted before the wrong option is considered, and that the detailed legal risk and regulatory and commercial due diligence be performed prior to signing the the ALPHA, the Asset Loan Framework Agreement, it has been noted that the IFC has requested that the full legal review be conducted before signing the ALPHA.
Yes. And then after this then is communicated, what do we see happening then on the 6th of October 2017, as you deal with it in paragraph 26?
Paragraph 26. Chair, then you may recall that I've indicated, things move so fast in Eskom that on the 6th of October, Mr. Johnny Dladla is removed and replaced by Mr. Sean Maritz. He took office, Caliph Kassim and I, so he then, it's certainly, Chair, from the time that he took office, in less than a month, we had a meeting with the wrong individuals. And I think a bit of background to that, Chair, is that the issue and my reluctance to advancing the ALPHA or the ADFA was that, and hopefully in my supplementary I can cover that in a bit more detail, Chair, is that this wrong facility would not provide immediate liquidity to Eskom. It will not alleviate the liquidity challenges that we are facing. I made that abundantly clear in my meeting and my last discussion with the Warong team, that this will not provide the solution that we are looking at. We are not even focusing on this transaction. They've had a meeting with Mr. Maritz, and then at a later stage on the 20th, Mr. Kassim and I are invited to a meeting with them. They then suggested we should give them at least something to consider, that they can look at a short-term liquidity facility that would assist Eskom. But it is also clear, Chair, that this was the entry into us getting to the long-term facility, this proposed short-term facility.
Now, as you were meeting them now with Mr. Sean Maritz and Caliph Kassim, where is the RFP process?
So the RFP process has been concluded, Chair.
Oh, okay.
And we are still in discussions with them around the terms and the issues that was raised in the proposal, and also doing the process that was indicated, Mr. Muhammad Khan's submission, the legal submission, Chair.
But the RFP process, as I understand, only gets concluded when you sign an agreement, isn't it?
Yes, Chair. So that's the ultimate.
Yeah, but you haven't signed an agreement.
No, we haven't
pursuant
signed
to the RFP process.
No, Chair.
So therefore it can't be concluded.
No.
You have asked for proposals and you have received proposals, isn't it?
Yes, Chair.
So there is still a process of determining which one of these various proposals will be chosen.
Yes, Chair.
Right. So that process hasn't been completed.
Yes, and the wrong one, it was, so we were looking at a couple of the proposals from the RFP, Chair. The wrong one was one of them.
Yes. Now, you are having this meeting with the Warong, with the Warong representatives to discuss their proposal, or to discuss their proposal, I guess. Isn't it? Am I right?
So
for all intents and purposes, whatever you are discussing, they want you to reach an agreement with them.
Yes, Chair.
And we know that you definitely don't want that, but other people that are involved from Eskom, their situation might be different.
Different, yes, Chair.
Yeah. So now, meeting with one entity which has made a proposal when there are other proposals, other entities that are competing with that entity, is that permissible in terms of Eskom's processes where there is an RFP process? In other words, are you allowed to meet with one and discuss their proposal and meet with another one, or is there another process, or meeting with them if they are part of those who have responded to the RFP is not a problem?
So, Chair, what traditionally would happen is that we would go through the RFP process. There would be an independent evaluation that
takes place.
That takes place independent from us. That would be participating in the process.
Yes.
And they would then indicate. Firstly, they would say this is the proposed shortlist.
Yeah.
Then they would suggest this is the list, or alternatively, this is a list that we see that there's potential in. Let's bring them in for a meeting, and we normally refer to it as a beauty parade, where they come and discuss their proposals, that we interrogate it and understand it better. So the reason for mentioning, that's the process that we follow, Chair.
Yes.
And that is the discussion that we have with them.
Yes.
And then we would go into a negotiation phase with them around that, Chair.
So meeting with them alone in this process wasn't by itself wrong. What may have been wrong is that this prior step that you say normally takes place, which is done independently, didn't take place. That's what may have made it wrong. Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just following on that, you had said that, are you aware that there was an evaluation process of the RFP tenderers?
Yes, there was an evaluation process. To my understanding, there was here.
Yes, and then who was the successful bidder, if I may put it that way?
So there was a number of successful bidders, and we engaged the JP Morgan transaction, amongst others, the Warong transaction, and there was a proposal both from ABSA and RMB that, from memory, that ended up being the proposals that we were pursuing.
Yes, and that...
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Successful or shortlisted?
Successful that we were going to pursue. or they were evaluated, and
they would receive further consideration.
Consideration, and we need to negotiate and understand better.
And ultimately, there would be only one successful one.
We might look at all of them.
Or you might look at all of them. Oh, okay.
So they were not competing.
But successful in terms of moving to the next
stage.
Next stage. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Mr. And then in AP 18, there is a memo at page 478. If you look at page 479, that's under your hand, am I correct?
PT1.
479. 9. Okay.
Yes, Chair. That's 478.
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, it has just been brought to my attention that it's 1 o'clock. Maybe we could adjourn for lunch.
Okay, we'll take the lunch adjournment.
Thank you.
And we'll resume at 2 o'clock. We
Thank you.
adjourn.